Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for your time today. Since your writing cheerleader is designed to support emerging writers, my question is, what is your writing process?
Oh, wow. So I typically spend a lot of time brainstorming before I ever put pen to page. I'm one of those writers who kind of has to have a clear path of where I'm going. So typically I'll write out like a beat sheet with just major plot points on it. When I was an early writer, I was definitely a pantster, but now I tend to be somewhere in between plotter and discovery writer. So I'll typically write out the characters' goal, motivation, and conflict. I write out the major beats. And once I feel like I have an idea of where the story's going, then I'm definitely a very chronological writer. I have trouble skipping forward several scenes if I get stuck. So if I get stuck somewhere, I just do whatever I can, like whether it be character interviews or that sort of thing along the way to get unstuck because I definitely can't write out of order. So that's just how my process goes.
And how do you save those files?
How do I save
Like all
files?
your drafts?
So I typically end up having a lot of different files because it'll be like, say book 3 in my series is called Wicked Cowboy Wolf. So when I was writing that one, it was like Wicked Cowboy Wolf Draft 1, Wicked Cowboy Wolf Draft 2, right? And it would keep going on down the line until I get to final draft. So there's multiple drafts and revision processes. I usually try as much as I can to write like a full first draft without spending too much time editing it. I maybe sometimes tweak the beginning chapters. And then once I have that initial draft, I go back through and I will do a read through on my own. And I usually do that once or twice before it goes off to my agent, and then it will be edited by her. And then, so there's more drafts, and then we do another draft with my editor once she reads through. So lots of different editing processes, and I have all those docs just labeled with numbers and sometimes with dates as well, so I know the most recent date is the most recent draft.
Oh, okay. Well, this brings up a really great point because you mentioned all these drafts and numbers. Oftentimes I get writers that are just like, oh, well, I wrote my book, here it is. And they don't understand the revisions. Like, what's the average amount of drafts you have before you go into it actually goes to your agent? And then how many with your agent before it actually goes to your editor? And then how many with your editor before it actually hits shelves?
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a lot of drafts total in there. So I would say in the early days of when I was like a baby writer,
Right.
there would typically be at least, I would say, typically about 3, 4, or more drafts before it would even go to my agent. It would be a lot of different drafts because the books needed more work then, especially since I was a newer writer and I was a bit of a pantster, so I wasn't quite as skilled at figuring out the beats of a plot. I needed a lot of drafts before it even got looked at by my agent. Nowadays, I would say I probably go through about 2 drafts before it goes off to my agent, but that's kind of because I've done a lot of that plotting and sort of revision work, both at the beginning when I'm thinking about the concept of the book and how I want it to turn out, and also as I'm writing, I'll occasionally go back and look at earlier chapters and tweak and edit as I go. So I think that's why there's less drafts now. And so it will go to her, and then she usually gives me 1 round of edits, sometimes 2, depending on the state of the manuscript. Um, and then it goes off to my editor. My editor and I have only ever had to typically do about 1 round of edits. The manuscript is already highly polished by the time it reaches her, But then once she has read it, it goes off to another copy editor, right? And it gets copy edited. And then, so I go back through and I do copy edits, and then we get final page proofs. So you're figuring in total, there's probably close to, my 2 initial edits plus 1 edit with the agent, 1 with the editor, and 1 with the copy editor, at least 5 or more revisions before it ever gets close to reaching readers. And that's if the book comes in relatively clean to start with.
That was a wonderful explanation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and so now, what's the one place on social media that you interact with people the most?
I would say I interact with readers the most on Facebook still. I'm active on Instagram and Twitter as well, but I find that Twitter's kind of harder for having a back and forth dialogue, and the same thing goes for Instagram since it's mostly picture driven. So I feel like I get the most interaction with my readers and other writers on Facebook because you're able to comment and interact more.
Okay, and I don't know how to link them in the videos, but I will put your social media contacts in the description below.
Awesome, thank you.